So I've been avoiding talking about what has been going on with the Gaza conflict, mainly because there's a lot of propaganda that has been happening, and while there have been some, we're just going to go ahead and say idiots, who have decided to come into my chat and say, hey, that makes you a coward for not giving your opinion. No, it means that I'd rather be responsible and not give misinformation. I feel like that's a reasonable thing to do, generally speaking, but, you know, why not? That said, we do need to go ahead and talk about what has been happening with the conflict recently. So let's start off, at least with this video, talking about what's been going on here. And I also just realized, strangely enough, that my monitor button is not working now, which is just fantastic. It's exactly what I need in order to feel great. There we go. Now it's working. Now I've got it working. I love when my Stream Deck just stops working. It's my absolute favorite. But before we get into anything, let me go ahead and get some fan art stuff talked about before we do anything else. Because you know what? Sometimes people support the show not financially, but with their creativity. And that is just as important as anything else. So, this one is from Fluffer Bakura. Said, seeing as there is a Genshin sponsor, they are reposting this. I did get a Genshin sponsorship for a little while, so this one is here. A bit of a Genshin Impact Suris. Thank you all very much for your fan art submissions, everybody who has done so far. If you want your fan art to be shown in a future video, drop it into the fan art section of the Discord. And that's even the people of you who do the cursed shit. Even the people who do the weird cursed silliness, that's okay. You can do that too. There's only so much of it I can deal with. There's only so much of it I can deal with. Anywho, let's go ahead and take a look at what's been going on, because here on our side of the border, we've been running into issues with students being unable to protest at campuses, or rather, protesting at campuses having a lot of severe repercussions. Places that you would think are... everything in America is supposed to be kind of a free speech zone, technically speaking, but areas where you would think that ideas are allowed to do their thing have not been as much at campuses. Now, there's a lot of sides to this that I have to cover. There have been anti-Semitic attacks at campuses. And I'm sorry, but there is no amount of what is happening to Gaza that makes anti-Semitism okay. Because it's not because people are Jewish that this is happening. Zionists and people who just happen to be Jewish are not the same thing. Wanting everything in power, like Zionism is a form of nationalism. It's Judaistic nationalism. If you are a Zionist, generally speaking, that means that you are very in favor of the state of Israel and anything that it would do to increase its means. It's just like being an American nationalist is also bad, because you tend to favor heavy imperialism. As a result, you're okay with us, colonizing a nation and fucking up a whole bunch of other cultures just because we want to. That's what nationalism leads to. It leads to destroying other cultures and the sanctity of other cultures. It's also kind of indisputable that regardless of if you want to say that what's going on in Gaza is or is not a genocide, that what's going on in Gaza is not fair to the Palestinians in Gaza. It is not right. So I'm not trying to both sides of this. I'm trying to give perspective to what has been going on in that area with that conflict. There's also another side of this that has to be talked about as well before I get into anything, and it is that America's gonna support Israel. Any support that we give to Palestine, any support we give to the Gaza Strip, is going to be a pittance compared to what we give Israel. And the primary reason for that, aside from the fact that most of the voter base in America is Christian, and a lot of them believe that Israel should be maintained in the way that it is, a lot of that coming down to Christian theocratic reasonings, is just the basic problem that we are not trade partners with Palestine. We are trade partners with Israel. There are a lot of goods that are exported out of Israel that we buy here in the United States. So, what does this mean? This means that when you're looking at the president's response to the tragedies in Gaza, when you are looking to the responses to the Hamas attacks, when you're looking into the responses on the IDF attacks, you're going to have to put them all through the perspective of they are a trade partner with the United States, and therefore our government is going to do everything in their power to maintain a positive relationship with them, and then sometimes decry Netanyahu every now and again, maybe as a token pittance. I have to throw all of that there before we actually cover the topic itself, because this is a complicated topic, and anybody that tries to say that it's not complicated is an extremist or a moron. It's not a simple topic. Yes, there is a borderline genocide going on right now, and yes, there were attacks on October 7th that should not have happened, and this goes back about 80 or so years, and I did a video going over the history of the topic itself, and it may not have been the best video in the entire world, but the point of me going into that video was going, hey, there's a lot of baggage that is on both sides of this conflict, and while the bigger oppressor right now is definitely Israel, there's also other sides in the conflict that I don't want to cheer on. I don't want to cheer on Iran, one of the few places that it's okay to publicly execute homosexuals in, like that place is a place that we want to cheer on. Like, no. But unfortunately, monstrous theocracies like that are some of the few people who are sending any kind of support over to Palestine, even if it is in the form of Hamas specifically. It's a murky, shitty situation. And luckily, we have the benefit of news on the ground, giving us access to that information in real time, as opposed to having to wait for it to get filtered a billion ways in the media. But that also has the side problem of giving us unfiltered news, where people are going to form opinions based on videos and stuff that may be lacking a ton of context. It's the nature of things. So what is this manifesting as on United States campuses? Well, police arresting people at Washington University as one, pro-Israel agitators trying to create problems for people who are doing pro-Palestinian protests, and then actual SWAT teams coming out to fuck with protesters. So, that's about where we're at right now in the States. And you know what this reminds me of a lot, with some exceptions? This reminds me a little bit about the history of the Vietnam War here in the United States. So, in the Vietnam War, unlike this particular conflict, we were directly involved. We sent our own people to try to push them across parallels, and there was active conversation over whether we should have had people there in the fucking first place. And then, as protests started erupting on campuses here in the United States, National Guards and SWAT teams and stuff like that were brought out then, as well as people were decrying our government's involvement in Vietnam. This stinks of all of the same shit, where people were protesting the Vietnam War, and then our country decided to send in a whole bunch of people to basically decry the protests, and it's gross. So let's go ahead and read the NPR article on it. So hundreds of students at Washington State University, their community members, local activists, demanded that the private university stop investing in Boeing during a Saturday protest because it supplies weapons to Israel. Let me try to get this a little bigger so it can be read easier. Yeah, there are protests on Boeing right now because Boeing is supplying weapons that are going directly to the IDF that are not just being used for defending Israel from Hamas attacks, but are also being used to kill the citizens of Palestine, mow down their hospitals, mow down their universities, mow down everything that has been built in the Palestinian region. They also called for an end to the years-long war in Gaza, where in recent months, thousands have died in Israeli bombardments following the October 7th attack by Hamas fighters. Now, it's kind of interesting to me. I'm no supporter of Hamas in any way, shape, or form. An organization that started its history wanting to wipe out all of the Jews. No, that's not where I want to hang up my hat. It is interesting to me, however, that the conflict in Gaza right now is characterized as having begun on October 7th, when, again, when I looked at the history of this particular conflict, it stretches back like 80 years or so. It stretches back to the disillusionment of the Ottoman Empire. This has been an on-again, off-again battle for fuck knows how long. So characterizing this as having begun on October 7th, like, no, that's the most recent reigniting of the conflict. That is not when the conflict began. And it's one of the things that makes this as problematic as it is to talk about. It goes back so fecking long that people think that they have the entire context by looking at October 7th and forward, but they don't. But they don't. Said, end the Gaza siege now, the group chanted while marching around the campus before setting up an encampment at the school's Tisch Park. Stop the killing, stop the slaughter. Gaza must have food and water. Police from across the region responded to the demonstration and about 5 hours later declared it as an unlawful gathering. After protests set up camp in violation of university policy, campus police told them they had to leave. Law enforcement officers arrested more than 100 people who refused orders to leave campus, including 23 Washington University students and 4 school employees. Ah, yes, you're not allowed to be here on the campus despite being a student at the campus or a worker on the campus. Okay. All will be charged with trespassing on the campus that anybody can walk on via public grounds. Some will be charged with resisting arrest and assault. I'm just going to go and say right now, resisting arrest is probably the most stupid fucking charge you can ever have, and I don't understand why America has this charge. Just at a basic level, does somebody want to be arrested? No. What do you expect somebody to do if they feel like an arrest is happening and they don't deserve to be arrested? They're going to resist arrest. That's like basic human instinct. This is like in how in Germany, it's not a felony to try to escape prison because the human inclination is to try to escape. But here it can add more time onto a sentence. It doesn't make any sense to me. It's counterintuitive to how human beings' minds operate. Rem's husband says, what do you mean silence? The whistleblower simply died from bullet and brain syndrome. Very common illness in Russia. Jeez. We are fully committed to the... Jeez. Christ. Okay. Camera is being very stupid. Said we are fully committed to the free expression and we are fully committed to free expression and allow ample opportunity for voices to be heard on campus, university officials said in the statement. However, we expect everyone to respect our policies and we will take swift action to enforce them to their full extent. Jill Stein, a Green Party president, hopeful in town for campaigning an event, was briefly detained and released. Students at St. Louis area university have called the demonstrations to cut ties with Boeing for months, or have called on their administrations to cut ties with Boeing for months because of the company's ties to Israel. Said we are calling on the university to divest from genocide, said Penelope Taman, a sophomore who was part of the protest. Midnight says, yeah, to be clear, it's referencing the death of some whistleblower of Boeing's half-assed cost cuts. Cost cuts? What? That's not the word I meant to use. Okay. The demonstration at Washington University is part of a wave of demonstrations on college campuses across the United States, some of which have been met with forceful police responses to control crowds. Wow, burping is not good in the middle of reading things. Jesus. In St. Louis, students and activists expressed outrage at the school's responses to an April 13 pro-Palestinian gathering on campus, where police arrested 12 protesters and gave them summons to appear in court. Washington U officials suspended 3 students on the grounds that they disrupted an on-campus event. Pro-Palestinian, and this is just showing the demonstrations there. So, okay. It's the Kent State stuff all over again. It is people trying to say, hey, we are on the side of not slaughtering Palestinians. We are on the side of not killing Palestinians. And then everybody says no. It's inconvenient when you say that. It's inconvenient when you protest that. You see, people don't get mad at protesters for protesting. They get mad at protesters when they inconvenience them. Society as a whole, and this is not a good thing, by the way, society as a whole wants people who protest for a cause they believe in to be inconspicuous and conveniently located in such a way that they are not disruptive to anyone. Which defeats the entire point of a protest. If a protest's point is to raise awareness for a particular issue, and even in some cases to inconvenience those who are causing the issue, in an effort to try to get them to change doing a thing that is an issue, you know, like supporting a genocide in Gaza, if your goal is that, it runs completely counterintuitive to society's perception of a protest, which is do it somewhere else or when you're on the right time to do so. Don't take a knee at a football game. That makes me angry, but definitely pledge your allegiance because that's not propaganda. I swear. Jeez. Razor says we're on the side of not sending money to governments committing genocide. Yeah, well, like it's perfectly reasonable to be that. Tyra says, I liked Vosh's theory. He did actually do it knowing it'd make Boeing look bad as one final fuck you. I feel like I'm missing some context for that theory. Tyra says, but civility politics? So, like, there is a time and place for civility politics. If you are going to talk to elected officials, it is a good idea to chameleonize yourself into a person who looks like they are respectable in the room. It will make it easier for a politician to see you and want to listen to what you are saying because you look like them. It's basic human psychology. It's adapting yourself to somebody else's perceived schema. But when we're talking about a mass protest, civility politics can go be damned. The point is not to be civil. The point is to be, I don't want to say problematic, but basically that. The point is to be disruptive. Disrupt everybody's everyday lives in such a way that they have to consider your position, at least for a little while. The point is to be loud. When people do protests like that, and they do it, say, like, on the road, people get angry and say, like, what if I was going to the hospital? And you know what? That is a completely fair assessment. So, almost any protester, unless they are an asshole, will be willing to move if there is an ambulance or if there is a car that has a person in it that needs to go to a hospital. If they don't, then remove them physically. I'm just going to say that right now. If you've got like a loved one who's in the car and you need to go to the hospital and there's a protest for anything, and they are preventing you from going to the hospital to get that loved one medical care, yeah, no. Everybody who is involved stopping you is now no longer a protester. They are now just an asshole. But I digress. Hypotheticals about protest out of the way. This is talking about not that. These are people protesting on a campus. These are not people protesting in the middle of the street, preventing people from driving to work or driving to hospitals. These are people protesting in the middle of a campus. More than 130 students, faculty, and staff signed a letter to Washington University leaders last week criticizing the university for allegedly infringing on the students' freedom of speech. They said no matter where one stands on the ongoing violence against Gaza or whether Boeing is a good associate for the university, one should be concerned that the attacks on freedom of speech and academic freedom have increased significantly in our country and on this campus. Michelle Allen, a senior lecturer of architecture at the school, echoed the letter's sentiment while emphasizing Washington U students are attempting to share their beliefs and they should be allowed to do so, despite what their viewpoint may be. They said, as faculty, I feel obligated to stand for freedom of expression on campus, he said. We love our students, and we want to see them enjoy their right to free speech on campus. At Saturday's protest, students said they were frustrated with administrators who didn't appear to be interested in what the students are trying to tell people about the attacks on Gaza and the plight of Palestinians. The arrests and suspensions after the earlier protests made that clear. The fact that it has happened before proves the administration is not really interested in listening to students' voices about any of these concerns, said Max Franks, a Washington U junior student during the protest. The administration is interested in protecting its image and its bottom line. So get rid of the protesters so it doesn't look inconvenient to be on campus, and maintain ties with Boeing so that they end up having their pockets lined and filled. This is why college as a for-profit organization is a stupid idea and we need to abandon it probably yesterday. The administration is interested in protecting its image and its bottom line, so if we hope to achieve anything, those are the things we need to interfere with. Some Jewish students at Washington University said the protest was scary. Charlie Vengerton, a sophomore who's involved with both Washington U's Hillel and Chabad, called some of the chants she heard Saturday anti-Semitic. They included "From the River to the Sea." The meaning of the refrain is disputed by Palestinians and supporters of Israel. They said that it is straight up hate speech. So, this one's interesting to me. I do recognize that there is a difference in opinion on what the from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free means. One side, the Israeli side of it, tends to think that from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free means that Palestine will wipe out all of the Jews from the River Jordan to the sea, and that will make Palestine free. And then Palestinians say that no, it means that we don't have a whole lot of land. And the land we do have, we would like to be free from the fucking IDF. So, you take your opinion on which one of those is actually true. I think the best thing to do whenever somebody is saying that chant, ask them what they mean by that chant, as opposed to imposing whatever fucking meaning you think is best there. If you are a student who is scared about the protests from one of those people who are pro-Palestinian, ask them, hey, what does a free Palestine look like to you? What does this statement mean to you? And if you do get something like, the Jews will be wiped out and then Palestine will be blah, 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 then yeah, it's probably anti-Semitic. It's probably bad. But if it's, hey, we want the IDF to stop shooting us, that's probably not anti-Semitic. In fact, that's probably, you know, perfectly reasonable. It's perfectly reasonable to not want another country to be oppressing you and just attacking you and shit. I don't know. Maybe that's a basic thing to be understood by most people. Jessa says, that also seems like a stretch to me, although I'm not an anti-Semite, so maybe that's just me. And I've seen some people who have the opinion, how's it going, Rotten Guts? I've seen some people on Twitter who have the opinion that, like, if somebody does the whole from the river to the sea chant, it is most certainly a chant of genocide. I don't agree with that. I think that, like a lot of slogans, that chant has a different meaning depending on who is saying it. Most of the students at a college campus are not going to be trying to say, hey, let's murder the Jews. She added she understands the fear that the protesters must have felt during the police crackdown, but supports the decision to have the police on campus. She says, I don't agree with some of the tactics used, said Vingerton, who watched the protests from campus, but the presence and being there in the university, shutting this down, and making it very clear that behavior like this will not be allowed on campus, I think is incredibly important. But behavior like what? Behavior like protesting? Because that should be allowed on campus. Jordan Kadash, a director for the ADF Heartland chapter, shared similar concerns and said in a Saturday night statement that he was dismayed to see protesters using terms like intifada. That would be a more problematic term. Like, the from the river to the sea thing has multiple meanings. But if we actually look at intifada, intifada means a shaking off or rising up, and usually is something about Palestinian resistance movements. So what that means, again, will vary from person to person, but generally speaking, this would be a Palestinian rising up against Israel, as opposed to defense from what the fuck they're doing. At least I can understand why that would be the position that some people would take. So there's probably some good reasons not to use the term intifada. Probably. IDF is the biggest Hamas recruiter for sure. I mean, Netanyahu did support Hamas when it was gaining power, if memory serves, because that basically meant that he had the ability to be as anti-Palestinian as he wanted, because he could make it look like his opponents were crazies. The Arabic term, which means shaking off, refers to two periods in the decade-long conflict between Israel and Palestine. For many Palestinians, the term represents solidarity with the uprising against Israeli control. Some Jews, however, say the word encourages violence and terrorism against their people. I mean, so, all right, this is one of the reasons I don't like covering this particular topic. As important as it is, geopolitics is not my strong suit. However, I will say this. If you are part of a nation that is oppressing another nation, any action that that nation takes against you is considered terrorism. If you are, say, a nation that receives a ton of global support because there are a lot of fundamentalists that believe in your nation existing for apocalyptic reasons, it is very easy to count anybody doing anything against your nation as terrorism, even if it is done in retaliation for shit you have done. This is why America can claim a whole bunch of stuff as terrorism when we are the ones putting bases in other people's countries. Like, so, terrorism is just politically motivated violence. And if somebody is oppressing you, and you resist, that's violence, and it can be considered politically motivated. So it's, yeah, I don't know how to feel about this, because there is a lot of context that I would need to have before I'm able to make up my mind on this shit. Midnight Rider says, according to a YouTuber who's a lawyer, Leisha Miller, the sad thing is that the Gaza debacle is not really a big issue for the 2024 election. The economy is. Well, yeah, we have a 5% rate right now of inflation. It makes sense that we would need, like, the economy is going to be a huge issue for American voters more than anything, because not everybody's informed on the Gaza conflict, but everybody is feeling the 5% inflation going on right now in their back pocket. Rotten Gut says, I wonder how intense the protests are going to get compared to the BLM protests. Peak, if it does, will have an effect. I don't think it's going to be as large as the BLM protests. My reasoning is Americans are very... not insular people, we are very independent people. Going to protest for Gaza is going to protest on behalf of a foreign ally, adversary, person, depending on where they are in the political conflict. It's going to protest for the other. People's spoons, people's ability to have the mental faculties to go to those protests, to get involved in those protests, will start to wane faster than with BLM, because with BLM it was stuff happening in our own home. It was stuff happening in our own streets. So another bit of violence could happen that would reinvigorate it within a neighborhood. Because a neighborhood will see a black kid get shot by the police, and now they've got a whole new reason to do another BLM protest. Whereas in Gaza, the constant conflict, it's gonna turn into background information for a lot of people after a few years. Ukraine has turned into background information for a lot of people. The conflict in Ukraine is still going on. Russia is still attacking Ukraine, and that battle is still ongoing. But for so many people, that conflict has turned into background info. The same thing's going to happen with this. So I don't think we're going to see this get as big in America specifically as the BLM protests did, and even some of the BLM riots did, because, quite frankly, it's advocating on behalf of another, as opposed to something happening to your neighbor, your family member, your friend. That's not to say people don't have friends in Palestine or friends in Ukraine, but you, and hopefully you, the viewer, understand what I mean when I say that there's a difference between it happening in your neighborhood and how fast people are to react to that, and it happening with several degrees of geographic separation. So a call for intifada is a call for violent terrorism that targets civilians. He wrote, protests that use the term don't alleviate suffering, not bring about lasting peace in the global or local setting. So I do want to know, like, what does effective advocacy and protesting for Palestine look like to these people? And if it just looks like something that is convenient for them, then I think that's dumb. Rem's husband says, even if Trump was somehow against the war crimes in Gaza, I don't think it would sway anyone. No, and he wouldn't even say that in the first place because the Republicans would not vote for him then. Midnight says, according to Leisha, despite inflation, Joey is still, Joey B, so Joe Biden is still in favor over Don the Con as incumbent, as things are still better in 2024 than in 2020. So the thing is, the incumbent president always has an advantage. They always have an advantage come primaries, or come general election. But that has been at least one instance of the recent crap that has been going on in Gaza, affecting what's been going on with students here in the States. And I am going to try to cover more of the campus protests as things go on. But again, bear in mind, this is a more complicated issue than I think people want to pretend it is. So it may take me a longer amount of time than other creators to talk about these particular topics, because I don't want to get something wrong. I don't want to stumble over misinformation, and I don't want to be responsible for putting that misinfo out into the world as a content creator. I feel like I would rather focus on other important things going on, like ongoing trans issues in the United States, than something that I'm likely to screw up and cause damage as a result of. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you haven't already, and as always, everyone, insert end of video tagline here. Hey, I just quickly want to give a thank you to all of my wonderful patrons who keep this show running. YouTube and Twitch are a pretty bumpy ride at the best of times, and the stability a Patreon provides me is worth more than I can say here. I'd also like to thank each and every one of my $20 and up patrons here, and they would be Red Joker, Britzkrieg, Cameron, Dren, Jemshin, Smiling DM, Poundini, Mabbity Babbity, Naomi, Isaac, Nixie Chan, the Oberon team, Agamotto, Jordan, Ravi, Giuni, Kiratorian, Prisma, all of you, I'm not saying that part, and Starlight. And finally, thank you to everyone else that helps keep this channel alive. While you're here, why not check out another video? And thank you for watching.